The dumbest thing I could possibly talk about today, well, it's actually what I'm going to talk about today. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Steelers versus Cowboys Sunday night. It's an 8:20 p.m. kickoff at Acrisure Stadium, and it'll pit the home team against an opponent that really can't defend, but especially can't defend the run. So, in turn, what would be dumb for me to broach would be the concept that the Steelers should run against the Cowboys. In fact, run against them all night long. Why? Because the Cowboys have the 5th worst rushing defense in the NFL. And you knew where I was going with this. The Colts have the 2nd worst. And the Colts shut down Najee Harris as if he didn't exist. 13 carries, 19 yards. And yet, the reason I'm bringing this up, and hopefully this part's not dumb, is that I really don't know which way I'd lean if I were Arthur Smith. And here's why. From the pro-run standpoint, starting with that, you want to get Najee back on his figurative horse. If you want to be someone who says, and I heard a lot of this blowback this week because I was pretty critical of him in Indianapolis, he just needs to get back on his horse. Oh, you'll love him next week. Everybody rips him and then he makes everybody look bad. Okay, great. Wonderful. On top of that, you might want to run just because you've got all these new offensive linemen. It can be, it doesn't have to be, simpler to scheme for run blocking. Parentheses here, the broader Smith scheme for running actually is quite complex, which is why we haven't seen it yet. End parentheses. And on top of all that, you could have that demoralizing effect that you'd want to have on a defense that's already used to being dunked on. But the easy counter to that, the easy pro-pass counter to that, is that as soon as Justin Fields' figurative shackles came off in Indianapolis, the Steelers somehow scored 3 touchdowns and rallied from a big deficit, and at times looked electric, looked like they could really be a fun thing. Not just Fields. And rather than just trying first down run after first down run, Najee alone had 6 of those for 8 total yards in Indy. You could show the Cowboys something that they genuinely would not be expecting, and that's first down throws. Heck, you can take a first down shot or two. Get George Pickens in right away. Because you know what would be the other benefit of that? Make the other guys have to adjust for a change. Look, I get the whole Steelers bravado when it comes to this sort of thing, because it's on both sides of the ball, and it's a Mike Tomlin trait that's done a whole lot more good than harm over the years. The Steelers like to be the Steelers. The Steelers like to be the ones flexing in front of the mirror. And if they're so macho that they can go out there and run it whenever we feel like running it, even if they can't actually run it, they still find some sort of value in that. Me, I'd rather send the other guys into the locker room at halftime going, whoa, what was that? What was that? What are we going to do about that? And I don't know that we've seen any such scenario in any of the first 4 games. Again, either side of the ball. So not that I've got a vote in this process, but if I was Smith and I'm looking at all this and I'm looking at the Cowboys' shortcomings, the Cowboys' injuries, in essence, what I'm doing is instead of using the run to set up the pass, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to flip the script on these guys. I'm going to make them uncomfortable. And within that, I'm going to let Fields know, hey, dude, we see you. We see what you've done for us so far. We're trusting you. It might not necessarily work right off the bat. We might have to switch things back in the second quarter, but let's see what you got here. You've shown that you want to lead this team. All right, here's prime time. Here's massive Pittsburgh crowd around you. Here's national TV audience, if that's the kind of thing that gets you going. There's Al Michaels up there somewhere, I think. I don't even know. Does he still call games? If so, then Al Michaels is in the house. I don't know. We don't see the broadcast when we're in the press box. But tell Fields beforehand. It's your game. We want you to be the guy to take us to 4-1. We want you to take that next step as QB1. Heck, we might even call you QB1 after this. When we come back, J1Q. This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar. Today's J1Q, one of many, by the way, on this subject, taking aim at me. From Joe, who says, DK, were you really serious about giving up a first-round pick for Davante Adams, or was that comment meant to be a joke? I mean, sure, you get Adams, you work out the finances, but I think this team's way more than a wide receiver away from making the playoffs. I think Omar Khan would be a fool to give a first for someone at that position on the wrong side of 30. Joe, my point, which wasn't really in jest as much as it was to illustrate an extreme, if you'll recall my exact wording, it was, I'd even, da-da-da-da-da-da. I say this sort of thing a lot, but trades too often, I think in public, get weighed just by the actual exchange as opposed to the impact and timing and the needs of the teams involved. And the way I usually word that is win the game, not necessarily the trade. So if the Steelers were to give up something that you don't want to give up, Joe, and it doesn't sound like you want to give up much for Adams, even though he can still play. He's still an elite separation guy, an elite receiver, and he can still pile up the yak. Then what you're also saying, and you kind of hinted at this as well, is that you don't believe in the 2024 season. You don't believe that the Steelers have. You weren't even talking about contention here. I want to make sure I'm not misinterpreting you here. You said, I think this team is more than another wide receiver away from making the playoffs. I mean, they're 3-1, and the rest of their division's off to a really rough start. The Steelers would have to do some serious sinking to miss the playoffs. And even the darkest pessimist would acknowledge that the math is on their side if they can just continue performing as they have. My perspective on this is a little different, and this is where you can throw out the fairness of the exchange, or they need to pitch in a fifth rounder or take on some of the salary or whatever. I look at these Steelers, this overall roster, as a collective that's got its clock ticking. TJ Watt isn't going to stay DPOY material forever. Cam Hayward, at some point or other, has to age. Minkah Fitzpatrick's not going to be all-pro safety level forever. And we can do this about a handful of other players as well. I don't see the upper crust of this team staying at some star caliber a whole lot longer than the 2024, maybe 2025 seasons. So my feeling is now is that time. And I would not say that every single season. Heck, I would not say that even if there was 2 or 3 other, let's say, star types on the defensive side where you can say, there's just going to be a natural changing of the guard. Is Keanu Benton that? Maybe. Is Joey Porter Jr. that? Maybe. Do we know either of those right now? No. What you know is that you've got TJ here now. You've got Cam here now. You've got Minkah here now. And you've got those guys kind of making their way in. Even with what happened in Indianapolis this past weekend, this is a very, very good defense. And that can go a long way in those playoffs that you don't think they're going to make, Joe. So I'm not with you on this. I'm also not, obviously, in favor of giving up a first rounder. I'm trying to make a point here that there is urgency. And unlike free agency, you can't just say, Davante doesn't look like he's coming here. that's fine. We'll just go through the rest of the available talent. That's not what this is. That's not what this is. You have no control over the trade market. When an opportunity arises, you have to do your best to try to make it happen. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. Going to do another one of these tomorrow.